Hello, gentle viewer. You are either here because you enjoy listening to my videos, or you are a fan of Joss Whedon's 2002 television series Firefly, and you like hearing various YouTubers' thoughts on the series. Or maybe you are some combination of the two. In any case, I am here right now to talk about the Firefly episode Jaynestown. In my previous review for this series, I claimed that the episode Our Mrs. Reynolds was the funniest episode that we had gotten, and while that was true then, I am now making the claim that Jaynestown is even funnier. But where Our Mrs. Reynolds was essentially just comedy all the way with a little bit of nail-biting drama, I'm finding that Jaynestown is more well-rounded as an episode. The funny parts are significantly funnier than what we got in Our Mrs. Reynolds, and that's saying something. And the dramatic bits are much more heart-wrenching and emotionally moving. But before I go further, let me quickly sum up the events of the episode in case you haven't seen it before. This episode begins with the crew heading to a planet where they intend to pick up a package to deliver to someone else off-world. This planet is a place where mud is made and sold elsewhere. This planet is also a place where Jane, our resident not too bright but somewhat loyal bad boy, reveals that he has had a run-in with the law, and he is afraid that the man in charge, Magistrate Higgins, might remember him and hold a grudge. Things take a turn for the sideways when the crew of the ship finds in the middle of the town a statue of Jane. It turns out what Jane did to cross the magistrate of this world was to steal some $60 million from him. But he had to lose his money so that his hovercraft could stay afloat. And the people of this town misconstrued this act of survival as an act of Robin Hoodian heroism. The people of the town are easily able to recognize Jane, and they begin celebrating the return of their folk hero. Meanwhile, the magistrate catches wind of this and has Jane's partner in crime, who is left behind and imprisoned, released. Higgins tells Jane's partner that Jane is back in town and that maybe he should go and get some revenge. During the middle of the Jane Day that Mal convinced the townsfolk to throw, Jane's partner comes back, reveals to the entire town what really went down on that day, and then he tries to kill Jane. But one of the younger townsfolk gets in the way of the blast and dies protecting Jane. The episode actually ends on a bit of a downer as the people of Serenity leave with their cargo, but they're not too happy about the events that have transpired here. One thing that's essential about storytelling is that it is all about conflict. If you're telling a story about a man who is trying to make it to the chapel on time for his own wedding, the story would be pretty boring if he made it to the wedding and nothing happened on the way there. The story happens when he gets a flat tire. He's arrested because the cops think that he is someone else that they are looking for, and then he realizes that he doesn't have his wallet on him when he tries to hail a cab to take him to the church. Whether we realize it or not, we watch or read the story for the obstacles that get in the way of our heroes. If we're watching the Bill Murray, Randy Quaid, Gina Davis movie Quick Change, we may be saying, boy, I hope they can get out of the country without getting caught, but we're really there to see all of their troubles as they are trying to do that very thing. And Jaynestown is fantastic because we are there to see the obstacles that the crew of Serenity faces, and truthfully, at least for me, I don't actually care too much about whether the other guys get the cargo or not. I'm much more invested in the distractions from their main mission, which is to say all the stuff about Jane on this world. And that's absolutely fine, I think. This episode is so great, I believe, because it delves into who Jane Cobb is. Up until now, he wasn't an especially deep character. He was basically the hired muscle, and he wasn't very smart about it either. But we did see in the pilot episode that even though he is fairly despicable in many ways, he has a certain quality about him that makes the audience like him. He is sort of the big brother for Kaylee that Mal is more conventionally seen as, and this episode basically tackles that quality and builds an episode around it. Granted, Jane wasn't accidentally worried about Kaylee when she was in surgery during the pilot episode. He genuinely was worried for her. But here, a simple misunderstanding puts Jane in a position where he is seen as something that he is not. And over the course of the episode, we see Jane go through not one, but two character changes. Any other mindless thug would have mostly stayed the same with hilarity ensuing around him in a plot similar to this one. But Jayne at first seems to start to care for these people, and he isn't sure if using their trust in him to get a less than legal job done is a very good idea. And then when he sees that their trust in him has resulted in the death of one of their own, he reverts back to mean, ugly, nasty Jayne, and he yells at them and tries to convince them to stop worshiping him as a hero. And even though he's yelling at them and acting like good old Jayne that we all know and love, deep down I think he does this because he does care about these people and he doesn't want them to get hurt again because of something that he has done and brought on them. And what makes this exploration of Jayne so interesting is that Jayne doesn't suddenly become a different person after this episode. We see that he is capable of loyalty and nobility that we usually wouldn't associate with him, but that doesn't mean that he suddenly stops being who we know him to be, as we'll see in a later episode. And that, I think, is the mark of a fully formed three-dimensional character. When a character is complex and makes decisions that you might not necessarily think they'd make based on what you initially know of them, and then they later revert back to how you think they would have acted before, that's quite similar to how a real person would act in real life. Because no person is completely chaotic good, as the people saw Jayne, or chaotic neutral, as Jayne really is. Sure, placing fictional characters somewhere on the 9-square alignment chart makes it easier for fans and creators to understand characters and craft stories around those characters, but in real life, people are not one or the other. They are usually a mixture of all of the above. So, spoiler for the episode Ariel, but when Jayne later decides to sell out Simon and River, it's not inconsistent because we've seen this sort of behavior in Jayne before, and we know he's capable of being this kind of person. And not every person, once they've done something virtuous, is going to remain virtuous for the rest of their life. Occasionally, they're going to go back to being a scumbag, and then they may later become virtuous once again. That's how real people act, and in the world of Firefly, that's how fictional characters act. Overall, Jaynestown is a really fantastic episode, one of my favorites. It doesn't have any of the minor flaws that I've been seeing in some of the episodes that I reviewed recently, and even if it did, that wouldn't make it much lower in my humble opinion. I do hope you enjoyed my thoughts on this episode, and if you're keeping up with the series as I review it, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. And I hope you'll be back next time as I review another episode of this series. Until then, be sure to come back throughout the rest of the week to see some of my other videos. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day.